you're like me, you spend lots of time poring over maps, looking at weather data, all in an effort to help predict when and where my best times to hunt will be. It'd be nice if there was a reliable source with all this information in one place. Enter the Spartan Forge app. Unlike some other predictive apps on the market, Spartan Forge was created from military combat intelligence experience tailored for hunters, and stands at the nexus of machine learning and whitetail deer hunting. No more man-made algorithms. This is a predictive model based on real GPS collared deer data, historical and predictive weather, and the next level of mapping imagery, all at my fingertips. I've been using the iOS app this season, and it has replaced all my other mapping tools. Visit SpartanForge.ai and sign up today, or head to your iOS or Android app store. Use the promo code TRUTH to save some money and download it today. Mobile hunters, if you're interested in upping your mobile game, then head to tetherednation.com and check out their saddle gear. There are a few things you can actually buy that will help you become a better deer hunter or give you the freedom to hunt any tree or any situation. This is the reason why I started saddle hunting in the first place and why I use Tethered's gear. I can honestly say that Tethered's saddle gear has changed how I hunt for the better. Big tree, little tree, from the ground, it doesn't matter. I'm untethered by my gear to hunt the best setup for the situation, instead of hunting for a tree that my gear can use. My current core setup consists of the Phantom saddle, tethered one sticks, and the Predator platform, along with an assortment of their accessories. So if you want to up your mobile game, head over to tetherednation.com. Welcome to the Truth from a Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, brought to you by Spartan Forge. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 317. Today I'm joined by Daniel Lemmon from Do It Yourself Hunter, and we're talking about finding success while DIY travel hunting and finding the right pinch points. So stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you're doing well. Hope you are feeling fine, and hope everyone out there had a happy and safe New Year's celebration. Not a whole lot went on here at the Campbell household. We usually just kind of chill at the house, watch the ball drop, watch some college football this year, watch some crazy games. And that's about it. And then started off my year with New Year's Day. Went and worked out the poison that I ingested on New Year's Eve. I went to the jiu-jitsu gym, got some rolls in, and started off fighting into the new year. Didn't actually get any hunting done over the course of the holiday season. I actually had the week off in between Christmas and New Year's. And just had some family traveling to do to kind of visit some relatives and things like that. And then had some less than ideal kind of icing conditions where I wanted to get to, which kind of kept me out of those areas. And then things did warm up a little bit, but they warmed up with a bunch of rain. And so probably just best that I spent that time with the fam and put in some fam time. So I'm hoping here, before the statewide kind of closure of the season happens here in the middle of the month, I'm hoping I can get to that piece that I want to get to and do a little bit of digging around and, if nothing else, start making plans for next year. But we're going to go ahead and just kind of get to things today. Not going to belabor this up front. Have a super cool show for you guys today. I have on Daniel Lemmon from Do It Yourself Hunter. And I apologize in advance. I referred to it as the wrong name, I think once or twice or something like that during the course of our conversation. I don't know why. I just couldn't get the right words in my head that day. But he's part of a killer YouTube channel. He does a bunch of self-filming, and Daniel is just like a hardcore DIY bow hunter or DIY hunter just in general. He's been doing it for several years, and he just manages to kill really good deer pretty much no matter where he goes, it seems like. And I just kind of stumbled across their YouTube channel, and he does it with another fella. And I just really liked his approach. You know, his approach is probably similar in a lot of ways to mine, but different in some ways as well. But you know, he jumps in his truck and travels to wherever he's going to go. This year, we talked specifically about his hunts in Kansas this year and Wisconsin. You know, and then we referenced, I think, a hunt in Kansas that he had the year prior. And we just kind of dive into, you know, what he's looking for, you know, why he likes travel hunting, and you know, the types of setups he's really kind of looking for, and how he kind of goes about breaking down a hunt. Because as you guys know, any of you out there that travel hunt, You don't have, months and months of time, and you don't have necessarily years and years of intel on a spot, unless you've maybe made it back to the same spot, a couple different years. And so he's often, on limited time and stuff like that. And he's getting it done with regularity. And I like his videos because they're really authentic, and he kind of brings you along in his videos where he kind of explains thoroughly his kind of thought process, the strategic decisions he's making, and things of that nature. And when things don't work out right, he talks about those too. So he's not hiding anything, and it's really just kind of an honest view of a working man's everyday guy going out and chasing their passion, which I think is something that I certainly appreciate, and I'm sure all you guys out there listening kind of appreciate as well. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into today's show. And as always, I want to thank you all for listening. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today I have on a fella from the South that I've been trying to have on for a little while. We've been playing phone tag over the course of hunting season, trying to get hunts in and trying to figure out when to get together. And we finally were able to make it happen. And I have on Mr. Daniel Lemmon. What's going on, man?
Oh, not much. Just waiting on a little bit of weather to hit and get back to hunting.
Yeah, nice. So where are you at right now? Are you Mississippi? Is that
Mississippi? I'm north central, about probably 30 minutes from Oxford, which that's a big college town. Ole Miss. I'm sure a lot of people know where that's at if they ever watch college football or anything. But
yeah, Lane Kiffin, right? That's your
oh
guy.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You an Ole Miss fan?
Actually, I'm not any kind of sports fan unless it's hunting.
Yeah.
That's about the only sport I participate in or ever have.
Nice. That's awesome. Well, I should have mentioned at the beginning, you are part of Do It Yourself Outdoors. That's where I kind of found you. I was online, watching, videos as people do, watching hunting videos. It was probably not this past summer, but the summer before. And, just perusing through and stumbled across you guys' channel. And I really just kind of dug the do it yourself kind of approach that you guys take. And so I started just kind of watching the videos, and you guys have had a great year last year. You're off to, having a great year this year, and just, it's an honest kind of candid approach to the hunt. And it's kind of what I like and what I look for. It's not overproduced. It's the real deal, And so is that something you really kind of strived for whenever you guys, when you started that, or was that started before you, and did you just kind of join? How did that work?
It was started actually a pretty good while ago. Jeremy, he's the one that started this a long time ago. He actually had the show on the Outdoor Channel for 1 year, I think in 2003, or okay. 2 quarters. Mm-hmm. And he, had a family, had kids. Well, that wasn't really mixing with his hunting and trying to travel and do this hunt. And he was specifically, or I say specifically, mostly public land hunting, mm-hmm. even back then on the Outdoor Channel. And it kind of went on. He raised his family, got his kids grown and out of college, and he wanted to start back. I guess it's been 3 or 4 years ago now. And he asked me, he's like, you want to kind of film with me and, hunt and just put it on YouTube, and we'll see what happens with it. I was like, yeah, sure. No problem with me. And,
right.
It just kind of went from there.
Right. Now, were you self-filming even before that?
No, I never have.
No.
I just picked it up 1 year and went from there.
Dude, that's pretty incredible, actually, because like, you're pretty slick with the self-filming. I always joke with buddies of mine that do a lot of self-filming. I always start off the beginning of the year with the greatest intentions of carrying my camera with me on every trip or every hunt. And it usually makes it to about hunt 4 or 5, and I'm just like, man, I ain't carrying this stupid thing anymore. And I get fed,
oh man,
you know what I mean? I get fed up with it. So guys that are diligent about it, man, it's, kudos to you, man. Because just in watching I was watching, and we'll get to talking about these hunts, but the Wisconsin buck that you killed this year, like, man, you had to be quick on the trigger on that thing. You know what I mean? And the fact that you were able to get that thing in frame, I was like, dude, I would have blown that shot 3 ways to Sunday on that one.
Yeah.
But
oh yeah, you gotta be quick on your feet. You gotta go through the motions enough that it's just second nature to you.
Right. But man, aside from that, dude, you've had a killer year just overall. I was following along, like I said, over the course of the summer. I knew you had a Western trip that was coming up, and I knew you'd be going to a couple different states because you'd kind of detailed like all the tags that you had, and we're going to try to fill this year. But man, you went out west solo. I think you were with a
Yep.
group of buddies at first, but you ended up killing that elk solo. You had killed a great mule deer, and then you've been on
Yep.
a tear for whitetails, man. It seems like 2022 has been pretty good to you, right?
Oh man, it's been a good year. A lot of couple first, and just kept rolling on with that. First elk, first mule deer, and went on with the whitetails, and it's been going good. And there's still some good hunting left here in the south. The rut's just fixing to start kicking off and getting rolling good. So we got that to look forward to, and that'll be rolling on to about the end of January. So just home hunting now, I guess you could say.
Right. That's what I was going to ask if you had any more, what tags you had left to fill. So is it, Mississippi, or if you fill that quick, are you going to try to jump somewhere else?
Probably not. I'll probably just stick around home now. I've been gone for so long. It's not really getting old, but you kind of get wore out a little bit.
Oh,
I'm starting to get to that point.
yeah. No, I hear you, man. I'm completely honest with myself and with anyone else. I love to hunt, and for me, a long stretch is like a 2 week stretch, and then not saying that I can't go back to hunting, but after 14, 16 days of getting after it, I usually need a little battery recharge for a couple days after that. Just I need to get a little sleep. I need to take a regular shower, like just something, maybe eat some real food, something
Oh yeah,
to recharge the batteries, man. So, how long were you gone? Because you left. Was it the beginning of September or was it August? You left.
for Montana,
Yeah.
I left first of September, around I think the 10th is when I left,
Okay.
and I got back, I believe, the 26th.
Hmm.
Yeah, because it was 16 days from when I left to when I got back from that trip.
Right.
I turned around and left, I think, the 28th of October, and I got back the 22nd of November. So
That's a stretch.
that was a pretty good that was a pretty good yeah, that was a pretty good trip there. Pretty
Yeah.
long trip.
Yeah, yeah, it is. So, man, just to kind of so people know a little bit more about you. We mentioned you're from Mississippi, but what do you do for a living?
I am a carpenter, uh, build houses, remodel, doesn't matter, whatever.
Right.
Um,
And that's pretty conducive for your like your DIY kind of whitetail drifter lifestyle.
oh yeah, it is. I'm single, uh, you know, so I don't deal with that kind of stuff. Which
Hmm.
I mean, there ain't nothing wrong with it. I just ain't found the right one yet. So until then, I'm kind of a floater, I guess you could say.
Right, man. It's my advice is I don't know how old you are, but float as long as you can. That's my
Oh, I will.
that,
I plan to. I
right,
plan
right.
to.
I spent a lot of my youth well, I say youth, but like basically like my 20s, I spent as a musician. So I was, traveling, playing in recording studios, doing that. And whether it's hunting, music, whatever it is, if it requires you to be mobile, like you said, there ain't nothing wrong with having a family and stuff like that. But it's depending on what it is you want to do, you got to understand time and place, you know,
Exactly.
because there's, if you want to do that, there's sacrifices to be made on that end. But, then when it's time you want to have a family and stuff like that, there's other sacrifices that come into play and stuff like that. So,
Yep.
but, so man, back home, the area that you kind of live in, what I've never hunted the South. And just to be honest, I need to get to the South at some point and hunt. I always tell myself, one of these years I'm gonna come south and hunt the rut, whether it's Mississippi or whether it's hook up with some buddies in Alabama or whatever that has like a late rut, or with Alabama that have multiple ruts you can catch at different times of the year. But what kind of areas are you hunting in Mississippi? Like, what's that terrain look like? Is it is it swamps? Is it river bottoms? What's kind of what's in that area?
Well, there's really a mix of just about everything I hunt here in Mississippi. We got the Delta, which is flat, like I say, swamps, flat ground, no type of terrain change as far as like hills and stuff.
Hmm.
And then right here where I live, it's big rolling hills and super thick, not just a ton of farm ground, mostly just big woods. A lot of a lot of cutover,
Hmm.
you know, thick stuff. But like you say, we have a very different rut change all through Mississippi. Like our northwest corner of the state, it'll hit around Thanksgiving starting off.
Okay.
Um, that rut will go for 1 to 2 weeks, pretty heavy, and then you can kind of move down a little further eastward, and it'll be a little later, a little later. I mean, like I say, somewhere in the state, like I say, northwest corner, it'll start Thanksgiving, and then all the way down at the southeast corner of the state, it's February.
Hmm.
So you got 2 months there that's rut somewhere in the state you could go and hunt.
Right. Yeah, that's that's nice, man. Like one of the things I won't say that I regret that, but it is always kind of a little bit of a bummer for me is that in PA our rut lands, the typical kind of time frame. At the end of October, things kind of really start to ramp up, and in those first 2 weeks in November, up through Thanksgiving for the most part is whenever things are kind of popping off. But I think the date really around here is probably right around the 14th, 16th is like the peak breeding date, if I'm not mistaken. So anything just a couple days before that is when it's really kind of popping. And unfortunately, like those are the dates that I'm usually, in Kansas or in Missouri or Iowa or Ohio or wherever I'm taking one of my trips for the year or whatever.
Right.
And so I always miss the best time back home, which kind of bums me out. It's got to be kind of nice. You can do all your traveling during the course of the year, then come back to your home state of Mississippi and still catch the good stuff, right?
Oh yeah, that is, and that's one thing about living in the South. I've always thought about moving somewhere else up north, like say Iowa or somewhere where you can get a tag and hunt,
Mm-hmm.
really big deer. But I got thinking, I was like, man, I can go to all these different places, which I would probably still do if I even, if I was to ever move up there. But I was like, man, I can leave here and go hunt, say, Kansas, Iowa, Illinois. You got Missouri, Wisconsin, Minnesota. You got all them good places, and I can hunt them into October, November. Come back home for Thanksgiving, and then I can start hunting around here and hunt all the way to the end of the season here. So I can hunt the rut for 3+ months
I
of
know,
of,
right?
of a year, you know, and
Yeah,
that is nice about that.
yeah,
So
yeah, for sure, man. That's one of the things I've always wanted to do. I haven't done it yet. Was just to kind of to chase the rut, across the country in different states like
right.
Florida. Florida has a different rut than the
Oh
than the
yeah,
Midwest. You know what I mean? The Midwest has a different rut than the South, and just kind of do that and chase it for the full year, and just basically be able to hunt the good stuff, like you said, for months on end. That would just be awesome. Because for those of us Midwesterners and Easterners, it's like you get like that, flurry of, you know, let's just call it 2 weeks of magic, right? Or maybe 2.5 weeks of magic. And then after that, you're back to the grind of, bucks not wanting to move, or after gun season, it's, they're pretty scarce at that point to try to find, which makes
right.
it pretty tough sledding. But man, when you get ready to take an out of state trip, I'm always curious how guys, different guys kind of prepare for this type of stuff. So, just kind of walk me through your process of what you do to kind of get ready to go out of state. Like, what do you look for in a parcel? Like, I guess let's just start there. Whenever you're saying, I'm going to pick a state, whatever state it might be, let's just say Missouri, for example, where do you start? Do you pick your area based on maybe friends that you have that you've got a little bit of intel about, or are you just purely going to like a map and saying, hey, where are some places that might have low pressure that I can just find deer?
Well, I've had a lot of people ask that question, comment and stuff, or send me messages asking, "Well, I'm planning on going out of state. What do I need to look for?" And a big thing I like to tell people, and this is always, if I don't know anybody that's told me about an area, to go look at or something like that, or I've never been there before, I always tell people, I was like, look for similar terrain you are used to hunting.
Mm-hmm.
If you're used to hunting rolling hills, big timber, look for places like that. If you're used to hunting farm ground, more open stuff, look for places like that. Because if you go and hunt something you've never had any experience with before, you're really making it 2 times harder for yourself.
Right.
Um, and I've been traveling hunting public land for the last 7 years, so I've been able to adapt over that period of time where I can look at anything and hunt it.
Yeah.
If it's flat ground, farm ground, hills. It doesn't matter. I can say I'm going to go there. I'm going to scout it, see what kind of sign I find, um, and hunt it. But really, if you're somebody going to a new place, just look for terrain or any kind of features of that area that is similar to where you're used to hunting.
Yeah.
Um,
I was just gonna say that's great. That's great advice, man. I kind of tell people the same thing, especially if it's your first trip. Don't make it any harder on yourself than you need to. And over time, you just start to get some confidence because a lot of it's confidence. It's like in
oh yeah,
knowing what you're looking at. And if you can go somewhere else, even if it's familiar, you get a little bit of that confidence, and then you can start to explore maybe some things that are different. Because I know for me, I hunt flat ground around me because I live in northeast Pennsylvania, not far from Philadelphia, and so it's not a lot of hills. I grew up hunting hills, um, and a lot of swamps. But I started going to Kansas, and that was an eye opener for me because it's all flat for the most part. I mean, it's got a little bit more undulation to the topography than people might think. But
yeah,
the place I'd been going to is all like no trees. It's all plains, and so it's all just pretty much strictly ground hunting, which is
yeah,
really different for me. And so I've been there the past 2 years and close calls, but just haven't been able to seal the deal. And it's that learning curve that you're talking about. You know what I mean? Where it's like I just kind of threw myself
exactly.
into the fire. You know what I mean? And you just have to be okay with like, hey, it might not work out the first trip, maybe even the second trip, but you keep doing it long enough, like, and you'll start to put the puzzle pieces together, and you'll start to see the picture right. And that's kind of seems like that's what you're kind of saying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's when you bounce from one extreme to a different that you're not used to. It's like I say, it's definitely a game changer that you're just out of the groove of.
Hmm.
You're not sure what they do.
Yeah.
Um,
So once you would find a parcel, you know, what are you? How are you defining like the specific kind of area you want to kind of examine? So you might look at it and say, hey, I'm going to go to Missouri now, and maybe you find a parcel that you know tickles your fancy because maybe it's just say for this example that it has some similar characteristics that maybe you're familiar with from from Mississippi or whatever the case is, or maybe something you've hunted somewhere else. Once you've done that and you found the parcel, what are you looking for as far as for that particular area that you might want to hunt? And not necessarily like the specific setup yet, but like I'm looking for 500 acres that I can break down really easily that maybe doesn't have a lot of traffic is out of the way or whatever the case is. Like, what's your kind of criteria for that?
well, I think the biggest thing I look for that I've noticed, or caught myself looking for everywhere I go is a
Hmm.
funnel of some kind. Um, like say my Wisconsin hunt there, I had a big field kind of behind me, and then the deer that I killed, he come around kind of below me, but just on the other side of him was a really big, steep, deep uh, drain that went down that hill.
Hmm.
So it was a funnel between that steep drain and that open field, and most big deer don't want to come out in the open,
Hmm.
especially on public because of the pressure.
Yeah.
And it was kind of thick right there where he come from, and it was just a funnel. And the reason I like looking for those is just because if you're in an area, and say it's big woods or just a lot of ground that you can't cover, especially bow hunting. Now gun hunting's different,
Right.
um, but bow hunting you want the highest percentage of the deer in that area to come within your effective range.
Hmm.
You want to be in the best spot that say 70% of the deer that's traveling an area is going to be right in front of you. And I found funnels to be the best thing for that.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, especially bow hunting, right? Just like you said, it's
Yep.
you got to get them so close. You got to find something, especially if you're going into some of these places somewhat blind, especially if it's the first time you've ever been there. Once you get a little bit of understanding, it's like you might understand, like, oh, well, they like to bed up on this point, so maybe I hunt, maybe you hunt there. But especially if you're going in with limited time or limited information, you got to do whatever you can to start stacking some odds in your favor, or else could be in for a long couple days of not a whole lot going on, right?
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. So, I mean, once you find that, like you find your funnel, right, or the feature that you want to kind of focus on, you, when you find the particular tree you want to get into, or the setup, if it's on the ground or or in a tree or whatever the case is, what are you, I hear guys talk about the kill tree or the spot within the spot, right? Like you might find the area where the deer want to come through or maybe spend time in, but what is that spot that's going to let you kill from that, within that area? What do you look for from that kill setup?
When I'm looking for a place, and usually when I go to a place and scout, I like to find three good areas, three of the the most high percentage areas that I've or most find. And like I say, most time they're funnels. They're all funnels. Like when I was in Kansas, I found three really good funnels, and there was sign coming through every one of them.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm looking for a sure enough kill spot, I want to be able to hunt it with a decent wind for me and also a decent wind for the deer to travel where it's in their face
Mm-hmm.
somewhat. But I'm off of it just enough. They feel comfortable coming through, but I also feel comfortable with them coming from that way,
Mm-hmm.
because when, and a lot of people like, man, they always want to hunt with the wind in their face. A lot
Yeah.
of people like to, but you got to really think like a deer.
Yeah.
If you live and your life depends on your nose smelling to keep you alive, you're not gonna mess up too many times that way. You're not gonna do too much dumb stuff.
Right.
You're gonna play the wind. You're gonna know, I can smell any danger that way. So I like to try to get over somewhere where the wind is just going to be cutting a corner. A lot of times I'll find an area, like I say, a funnel. I have like some trees blow down, and they're coming up to it, and then they're going around it. Well, I'll get back where they're not going to come through the blow down trees.
Mm-hmm.
I'll get where my wind's going to be good, and they're going to come around it. And sometimes whenever they do that, that wind may be a little off for them, but they're gonna want to get right back into that wind. So something like that's what I really like to look for when I'm looking for that kill spot. Just something that's a little off, that they have to do it, but they're not going to do it but for a short second.
Right. Yeah. It's almost like I'm thinking. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I might have just not seen it well enough in that Wisconsin video. But you almost use that. You could almost use like an open field to that advantage too, right? Knowing that a big
Yeah,
deer is not going to want to go, and that it doesn't have to be like a physical barrier necessarily. It could just be a a psychological barrier, right? They don't want to expose themselves.
right.
So like if you set up on the edge of that, right, or close enough to it to where they don't want to get close to it, that could be the thing that keeps them in front of you and keeps that off wind.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. There was a setup that I had kind of like that last year. That was the right deer didn't come through, but it was there was a down tree exactly what you were talking about, and I was basically giving up the wind, and he was going to have to make a mistake for 1 second to get around that tree. If he came through that day, he never came through, but it was a bulletproof setup there. So I love those types of things too, man. That's the off wind like that. The deer I killed in Iowa was exactly that. Like I was actually cheating the wind because he had it almost directly in his face, and I was sitting on the edge of a draw, and the thermal, as the sun was going down, was pulling my thermal, or was pulling my wind into that draw, and so I was dropping milkweed, and it was just floating right by where he ended up walking in. So, but when you start to find these spots, when you go to look for these three areas on any given parcel, are you kind of looking at it to try to be able to hunt, you know, multiple wins? Or are you looking at those specific areas knowing that you have a prevailing, a dominant prevailing wind of like, say, like a southwest that like by and large, I'm going to get southwest unless there's a front coming through. And you're looking at spots specifically to know that you can hunt a southwest out of that. Or are you trying to find places where you can kind of get away with hunting multiple wins?
Well, yeah, I'm looking for places where I'm there on limited time, so I
Mm-hmm.
can't step back and just say, all right, that's the spot I need to be, but I can't hunt it unless I have a northwest wind. But that's 4 days from now that's going to happen. I
Right.
need three different places with different winds for each one, um, that I can go to and hunt. That way, I got as many sets in the tree as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the reason I try to find three good areas, um, that have different wind, that you can hunt with different winds.
Right.
That way, I'm not ever having to sit and wait on a specific spot.
Right. Right.
Um,
And then when you're doing these hunts, like, because I know, at least for me, when I'm going to a brand new place, whenever I'm accessing somewhere, always trying to keep the wind in my face when I'm accessing and stuff like that. But sometimes if it's brand new to me, I don't know if the access I'm using the first day or two is the right access or not until I use it. So I guess talk to me a little bit about how you kind of look at access on these places where you have maybe limited knowledge about, and how your access might need to change once you kind of do a sit or two.
well, I try to, when I'm scouting somewhere and I go in, I find sign. I try to find an area to come in that I'm not finding much sign at. Say there's trails running, say east and west or something. I'll try to come in from the north or south, depending on that wind. Um, and I just try to come in from what looks to me like the least, you know, possible place a deer would come from while
Right.
I'm there.
Right.
And I have been to an area and walked right through a spot, you know, and got in a tree, and 30 minutes later had deer walk by and they never smelled
Right.
me. A lot of times, if you just keep like any of your clothes or anything from touching any little uh, brush or any kind of anything laying on the ground, as long as you just put a foot down and keep walking and go through there fairly quickly. I've had a lot of times a deer walk right through it with their nose on the ground and never smell it.
Right. Yeah. Especially when you get into that good time of year when they're not thinking right. You know what I mean? When
Right.
they're willing to if it doesn't seem super out of place, especially when you're hunting public, right? Like there's a chance someone 3 weeks ago may have walked through that area, right? And so those
Yep.
deer to some degree are conditioned to a degree probably that, look, they're going to have a little bit of human scent around them. And as long as it's not terrible, they may tolerate it. You know what I mean?
Right. Yep.
Which buys you a little bit of grace in that regard. But it sounded like you kind of answered, like, as you were kind of talking, I was thinking, I wanted to ask you, and you kind of answered it a little bit, but would you describe your hunting style? Do you consider yourself to be kind of a conservative kind of bow hunter, or do you consider yourself to be more aggressive, that, when you find the right stuff, like you just kind of dive right in, or do you kind of want to observe first and kind of see get the lay of the land and see what's happening? What's your kind of approach to that?
Well, it kind of depends. Kind of depends on the situation.
Hmm.
A lot of times, I like to go in an area and kind of just sit back and watch. Sometimes, I'm like, I need to be in there, and it's hard for me to explain because I don't think about, somebody asking a question like that when I'm doing it. I just do it, so I really don't know how to say what kind of area that I would just dive straight into, or what area I would sit back and watch and see what I need to do.
Hmm.
But I do kind of both,
Hmm.
um, depending on the situation.
Right, right. I, I know for me, if it's a high pressure area, I'm probably more aggressive, because I know that if I
Yeah,
think there's a deer in an area, it's like if I don't go in now and just on the right weather day with the right wind, I may or may not see him today. But I know for sure if I don't go in today, there's going to be people in there within the next 2 to 3 days. And if he's in the area, he's likely not going to be there for very long. And
yeah,
so in those situations, I'll just kind of dive bomb right in. If I feel like I got a little spot that's a little hidey hole that no one's bothering, and I know there's a deer there, then I'm going to probably try to time it and wait until I have a little bit of info, and then try to make a move. Or if I can see a long ways, like Kansas, patient there. I do probably yeah, I would be curious what your approach is there, but I do a lot of just observation, like glassing there, and then try to watch and see what they're doing. And then once I kind of say, like, okay, I think I know what they're doing, then I kind of make a move. And then at that point, I will jump up all into their business. But prior to that, I'm going to let them kind of have the run of the land a little bit until I kind of get an understanding.
yeah, yeah. I can see definitely. That's probably what I would do out west for sure, and that more open stuff.
Yeah.
It's just sit back and watch and kind of, because there's a difference in say hunting there and hunting here. Out there, you can see so much.
Yeah.
you can watch and see what those deer do. And if they do it 2 or 3 times, you know, you can make a plan to get in there and hunt
Right.
that area.
Yeah. The part of Kansas that I don't want GPS or town coordinates or town, but the part of Kansas that you're hunting, I just noticed from the videos it seems like there's there's trees around. I guess I'll say. So what's and people think of Kansas as flat. It has different kind of habitat and terrain topography depending on where you're at, what part of the state you're in. So what does the area that you hunt kind of look like just from like a topography kind of perspective? Because I know I've seen like you in trees in those areas and the places that I've been, like there's locust trees if you want to get all stuck up with a bunch of thorns, you can climb, but otherwise,
Yeah,
you're probably better off being on the ground. So what's that area of Kansas that you're in kind of look like?
it's a lot of rolling hills. It's a good mix of a lot of farm ground and rolling hills and timber. I'm trying to think what it could remind me of. Kind of reminds me of maybe Illinois, something like that.
Okay.
Sort of rolling big farm. It's crop grounds. Your crop grounds will be up on your hills, side hills, and stuff.
Hmm.
But it reminds me a lot of Illinois. Probably the best description I guess I could say about it.
Right.
But and the area I hunted, I don't think there's no like sure enough giant deer there.
Hmm.
Which I mean, the one I killed, I consider a really big deer. But
Yeah.
a lot of people I talked to in that area, like, man, they's like, 130, 140, that's pretty big deer around here.
Hmm.
So just going off of what people that lived around there told me, and kind of what I found, I don't see no super giant deer in that area.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, they certainly got him in places. I guess last year when Chad and I went out, he ended up killing a Boone and Crockett deer on like the 5th day of the hunt or something like that, which was pretty wild. I mean, it was literally the biggest deer I've ever like put my hands on before. You know what I mean?
really,
And it was pretty it was it was pretty unreal. And I've seen a couple big ones out there. I've yet to lay one down, but that's why I keep kind of going back to the place I've been going to, is because I've laid eyes on like some of the bigger deer that I've ever seen, and so I keep kind of keep going back to that area. But the downside of it is it's all off the ground. And so,
yep.
as well as anybody, it's like any mistake you make on the ground is just magnified by like 100. It's like
Oh yeah,
if you ain't playing the wind just right, or you don't have the right side, horizontal and vertical cover, if there's sun shining on the spot you're set up in versus being in a shadow, like all that stuff, right? It's all heightened, which makes it a little bit more, a little challenging. But
yeah. There's a ton of different stuff that happens on the ground for sure than in a tree. You can get away with a lot more in a tree than on the ground because you're at their eye level. You're where they're looking
yeah,
90% of their time.
yeah, and they're so good at picking up movement. Like they will just, they will pick that stuff up off the ground so quick, like from so far away too, that it's kind of unreal. How much time
Yeah.
do you spend hunting off the ground? Do you have some areas that you like to get in on the ground?
Not really.
Mhm.
If I went probably more west and hunted, I probably would more that kind of ground you're talking about. But
Mhm.
for around here, like I grew up hunting and kind of how I hunt other places, around here you don't hunt on the ground because it's so thick. You got to get up where you can see.
Mhm.
So not really a ground. Never really hunted the ground a lot, especially with a bow,
Mhm.
because deer in the South, I mean, they live somewhere. They remember everything that's in the woods. If there's anything that's a little changed, they notice it. I get
Yeah.
it's like say in your house, you come in and there's something moved. You've lived there, you've been there. You're like
So
that's not supposed to be there.
right, someone moved the couch. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. It's been moved an inch. Something's wrong. But a deer, especially in the South, they'll be coming through there and they won't even be looking at you. And all of a sudden they just turn their head and they're looking right at you, like staring into your soul. You're like, man, how did you know I was here? But
Right. Right.
I've never really come to a ground approach
Okay.
very much, especially with filming, because it's just so
Oh
so
yeah.
difficult.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, you did plenty good enough in Montana off the ground though, with that elk and mule deer. I mean, That's a ground game
Oh,
there, right? So,
it was. I wasn't ever, messing with my big camera, which I really wished I'd have had it on the mule deer, because going back and looking at that, at what I done, I've never been familiar with, say, alfalfa, or how tall it grew or anything. It didn't look very tall to me,
mm-hmm,
but we're probably talking 2 foot tall.
mm-hmm.
Um, and once I got up there and got in that little pivot ditch and was crawling up, I had plenty of room to be able to set the camera up and video. And man, that would have been great to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But uh, yeah, just taking the cameras out of something, and hunting is a big game changer. But I love doing it.
Right. I was gonna say you probably almost felt free in Montana, not,
Oh,
you know what I mean? Just like it was just like I'm hunting now,
yeah, yeah.
as opposed to trying to get everything on film and stuff like that. But I mean, yeah, so you like to pick out these three spots, and I really like that approach. So when you go out, for one of these hunts, how are you splitting your time hunting versus scouting? I mean, when you get there, do you just say, let's say you're on a 5-day hunt. Just I'm making stuff up. Let's just say you're on a 5-day hunt. Do you go, look, I'm going to scout the first 2 days, full days, unless I come across just undeniable, like this is a spot I'm going to set up right now? Or do you kind of scout/hunt each day and just kind of, hunt wherever the sign is that particular day until you find those three areas?
Uh, Pretty much when I get to the area, first day is going to be no tree set. It's going to be on the ground,
Mm-hmm.
scouting, looking, finding what I want to find. If I do not find my three areas the first day, I will scout the next day, second day, until I find, my three areas that I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Then that's when I start hunting. But I want to find my three areas.
Okay.
Whether that takes me a day, 2 days, 3 days, I want to find those three areas
Mm-hmm.
uh, first
And,
before I start, committing to a certain spot, or committing to the area and hunt. Like if I go in and find one spot, I'm like, oh man, this is the spot, I want to hunt it. And, I don't look for my other two spots, and I hunt this area for, say, 2 or 3 days, and I'm not seeing what I expected to, then I got to start all over again and go to scouting again.
right.
So that's why I try to find my three areas, before I ever start setting in a tree hunt.
Right. Do you now you mentioned earlier that you're really kind of looking for funnels, because you're trying to get those, increase your odds of the right deer kind of coming through an area. But
Yep.
you might have multiple funnels that you might want to check, and like you're trying to find the three areas that you want to prioritize. What type of sign, like what's got to be in that funnel to tell you like this is the spot that I want to be? Is it guys like different stuff, like for me, for example, I'm a scrape guy. Like I love being able to find like a big like community scrape or something like that. Those are kind of my preferred spots. I have another buddy, he's a big rub line guy. That's what he likes to hunt. So I'm just curious, what is it that you need to find in that particular area?
Well, scrapes is probably my number one thing,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you find, like you say, a big community scrape where you can tell there's not just one buck doing it, several bucks doing it.
Right.
Um, that kind of tells me, that there's deer's going to come through here that's going to check this. It may be a one-time deer that comes through this area, just cruising, looking, but he probably knows where this scrape is at. He's going to come check it.
Mm-hmm.
Whether he comes, I've watched a lot of people talk, YouTube and stuff about, having cameras up, and they get pictures of a deer come to an area one time a year
Mm-hmm.
and just come through there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the reason I like looking for areas, funnels with scrapes like that in that area,
Mm-hmm.
because it may be a one-time deal. That deer is going to come through there,
Right. Yeah.
It may be once a week, maybe once a month, but if he's going to come through there, he's just about going to come to that scrape. So that's why I look for those.
Right. I almost feel like, and I'd be curious what you think about this, but like I've run a lot of cameras on scrapes, typically around here, and sometimes out of state. Like I've had them in Ohio, and I've had some cameras on scrapes in Iowa whenever I was going out there to hunt and stuff like that. And I've seen that, and actually this played out this year in Pennsylvania. I have a big community scrape, and there's one buck that I got on it one time, and it was at the very beginning of the season. This is a big community scrape. It gets used all year round. Like I have deer hit it through the winter, spring, summer, fall. Doesn't matter what time of year it gets hit. it just ramps up activity as you get to like the middle of October on. It gets a little bit more hot and heavy. And this
Yep.
buck hit at one time, and I didn't have a bunch of good deer in the area this year for me to hunt, but he was one of the ones that I was like, if I see him, I'll kill him. And so the prime date for this particular scrape every year is around the like between like the 15th to the 18th, right? Never did I see him on camera again. Still haven't got him on camera again all season, right? I went and set up. A buck came in, a shooter came in, left, kind of oddly left, and then I didn't see this other buck come in, but I ended up seeing him bedded a little bit later in the same spot. And don't you know, it was that same deer I had on camera, I only ever had on camera once, and he was bedded not 40 yards from that scrape, downwind of that scrape, just hanging out, checking it, waiting for does to hit it to see if anyone was going to hit it. And so
Yep.
I often think, especially just observing that, and I've talked to like my buddies like Nathan Killen, who kind of they hunt off the sign because they feel like bucks so often will skirt that sign and just scent check it from afar. And that was the first time that I've kind of visibly watched a buck bed downwind of a scrape and never, because if he would have walked to that scrape, I would have killed him. But when he got up and went, I watched him bed for 2 hours. He just got up and walked north and walked away, and that was it.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, do you think in those areas, if you know a buck has hit that scrape once, do you feel like you got to wait for his pattern to come back to check that scrape, or do you feel like he could just be in the general area and scent checking it with the wind and just staying off the scrape, ever so slightly?
Oh yeah, I definitely think that. I
Yeah.
definitely think they scent check scrapes, and that's why I try to. I want to be within range of that scrape if I
Mm-hmm.
can. Um, but I want to be on the downwind side
Right.
because, like the deer I killed in Kansas, had a north wind and it was coming from my left to my right, and he come in, on my right side,
Mm-hmm.
and the scrapes were on my left. Uh, and he was just coming down through there. I know for a fact that's what he was doing.
Right.
Just scent checking scrapes, but
Yeah.
I like to try to sit on the downwind side where I can still shoot to the scrape. Because if they come upwind, they're going to come to the scrape to check it because they can't smell it,
Right. Right.
upwind of it.
Yeah.
And I like to be able to, to shoot to the scrape and then further down. That way, most of the time they're going to come within 80 yards of the scrape, majority of the time on the downwind side.
Right.
So if I get 30 to 40 yards from it on the downwind side, and I can shoot another 30 or 40 yards on to the downwind side of me, I can just about cover that area that they're going to scent check it.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's and that's about the yardage that I've heard other guys kind of talk about. Because I know Nathan, he'll often say, he'll find big sign, whether it's he's from Virginia, hunts the big woods there, and he'll find whatever his big rubs, whatever it happens to be, but he usually will sit, in an area that deer will have to travel through that's about 60 yards away from where that sign is, and that's usually kind of
Yeah.
where he sets up a lot of the time, but. So how do you use trail cameras at all on these trips? And if so, like how are you kind of, deploying them? Because, it's such short kind of stints, right? Like it's a week or however many days, so do you put trail cameras out? And if so, like how are you using them? What's the value to you in using those?
Well, I'll use them where you can. There's several states that you
Yeah.
can't use cameras, especially cell cameras. Cell cameras is what I take with me
Mm-hmm.
when I go because I don't want to have to go back in there and check it. I want it to be able to tell me what's coming through there while I'm off scouting or hunting somewhere else.
Yep.
And the reason I like using them mostly, and I know a lot of people are kind of against cameras, especially cell cameras, but if I'm going somewhere and say it's somewhere I've never been or don't know what kind of deer's in that area, I want my cameras out, and I usually put maybe 2 or 3. I don't want to get too many because if I get too many, then I'm I don't know where I want to be or where I want to go or what I want to do.
Or you spend a
Especially
lot
if
of
I'm
time
getting,
checking cameras and not hunting, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you can. You really can. If you get several deer on camera, you're like, oh, do I need to go hunt this today or that one? Especially for a decent deer, you're like, do I want to go hunt this or that?
Right.
But the reason I like having them out is it'll kind of tell me what kind of deer is in the area. So, is it going to be a place I need to wait on a sure enough good deer, or is maybe a 120-inch deer a good deer? Which I mean, what I like to look for is when I'm hunting is a 3.5 or older deer
Mm-hmm.
because that's on public land. 3.5 is a he's a mature deer. He's
Yeah.
he's been hunted. He's
Yes.
run into people several times.
That's right.
Uh, but anything in that category. But there's some areas, that a 3.5-year-old deer could be a 130, 140 inch deer, and then there's some areas that a 3.5-year-old deer may be a 100 inch deer,
Mm-hmm.
or 120. So that's kind of the reason I use them. It's like, okay, I'm on a trip. Do I want to wait or do I not?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I usually take a couple with me, and I'm similar. It's like if I can use a cell camera, I will, as long as I have, cell service. And I use it the same way you do, where it's like I just want to be able to set it out, and I want it to be able to tell me that way if I'm out scouting or if I'm hunting somewhere. If there's an area that's heating up or there's a good buck that's in that area, then I know that maybe, hey, the spot that I've been hunting in or I scouting in, maybe I need to abandon this spot and I need to spend some time over here. Um,
Yep.
I think where it gets, and I don't have any problem with them, obviously. I think where it gets a little, I think where people have some issue with it, and I think rightly so, is if someone's waking up in the morning and they get instant alerts, and it's like, they got a picture of and it's a big funnel or something like that. And maybe they live on the property. And it's like they get a picture and it's like, hey, I can be to that, that tree 300 yards away from him where he's going to want to walk to, and beat him there. It's like, then, yeah, a little bit cheating there. You know what I mean? But if you're just,
Oh, yeah.
if someone's just using it for inventory to, to not have to walk in and lay down more ground scent or, spend time checking cameras that they could spend time scouting or whatever. Like, to me, that's the real value in them, because using them the other way of trying to timestamp a deer and kill him, 30 minutes later, I don't know how feasible that is, just generally speaking anyway. So I think it's a waste of time. I think using them to not booger up an area, and be able to use your time doing something else is the best way to use those.
Right. Yep. And that's the reason I like using them, is because, like you say, you can go in an area and put it up, and then you don't have to go back and pull the card to check it. And, I can be sitting here and like, okay, there's been 3 bucks hit this in the last day. They're using it. I need to be in there.
Yeah.
Like when I was in Wisconsin, I had a pretty good buck come through 2 mornings in a row. It wasn't the same buck that I killed, but it was a good deer.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you know what? 2 mornings in a row, he's come through this spot between 7:30 and 8 o'clock. I was like, I need to be there. There's bucks traveling that, and I had several doe pictures at night. I was like, there's does coming through there, and that buck's been coming through there looking. I was like, I need to be there because they're coming through there looking. So
Right.
that's what I love about them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's a good transition to talk about the Wisconsin hunt, because I watched that video and it was killer buck, man. But I was just curious because I mean I knew you were from Mississippi and I knew you hunt all over. But I was just curious for you, what was there any like unique challenge, or was there something different about hunting Wisconsin, versus maybe some other places that you've hunted that makes you Wisconsin unique? Because Wisconsin is one of those states that I've not been to yet.
Well, Wisconsin, you got a lot of different terrain you can hunt. I like hunting the big, sure enough, big hills, which you
Mm-hmm.
can get on, say, the rivers and stuff, and it's kind of flat. You got marsh and stuff to hunt, and I've never been really a big flat land hunter or
Mm-hmm.
marsh swamp area hunter. But I mean, I can hunt it if that's all I got. But man, to me, I just love the big hills,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and in I've been able to play the wind is definitely kind of difficult, definitely more challenging playing the wind in the hills. But I just really like that kind of terrain and stuff.
Right. So the area that you ended up hunting, I know from watching the video you hung a camera and there was some deer coming through that area. But what kind of, going back to what you had talked about, like you're looking for these funnels, and you're looking for these 3 areas. What led you to this particular spot? Let's say before you put a camera up and you knew that there was, like a buck that was coming through pretty consistently. What led you to that spot, just in general?
Well, the year before, because it's actually 2 years in a row I've been there.
Oh, okay.
The year before I found this spot, and there were some really good trails coming through this area. And when I went back this year, I was like, I'm just going to go check that spot and see what that looks like. I went in there, and it wasn't as big a trails, wasn't near as defined a trails as there were last year. But there were still trails coming through, and what really really stood out about it is there was this thick ridge that kind of run east and west, really thick. I mean, you couldn't see in it. It was so thick. But these trails all run on the kind of the north side of this thicket,
Hmm.
and you could tell they wasn't going in the thicket. They was down below. I was like, you know what? Bucks are definitely going to try to use this.
Mm-hmm.
Because we got the funnel, we got the steep drain going down that they ain't going to want to cross on, and we got the field. I was like, they're going to come through here and come around this thicket, checking it.
Right.
And the day I killed that deer, I think it was a southwest wind. So, and I was playing that, and he, it was just kind of going just to the right of where he come from, but he had to come around, and he actually had to come in from the northeast. So, or no, not northeast, northwest.
Mm-hmm.
So it got off for him just a little bit.
I was gonna
He
say
was at
he
a
had to give that.
disadvantage for
He had to
just a
give that.
little bit.
Yeah, he had to give that wind up just for a second, right? Because those trails you said were on the north side, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. He had to give it up just for a second and come around. And, when he turned back, where he was going to turn back and go, he was going to be right back. Wind was going to be right back in his face again. But that's really the reason I went back there, just because I had scouted the year before and found good sign. I wanted to see what it looked like again this year.
Right.
And
so you end up finding, the sign was holding true from year to year. You end up hanging a camera in that general area, and you had that one good buck that was coming through there pretty consistent, and that was kind of the sealer for you, right? Like, the sign's there, it's a funnel, right? What you're looking for, and now all of a sudden I've got proof of life that wants to consistently be in that area, regardless of whether that buck comes through or not. I know that it's being used, and that was kind of the nail in the coffin to go back and put that hunt on, right?
oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Because you get in an area like that, it's not like hunting on, say private land
Mm-hmm.
where you got cameras out and you're like, okay, there's so many bucks I've had on. I say I got 3 or 4 bucks I've had in this area all year, and there's only one good one. Say a place like that, especially on public, you don't know what's there. There may be 10 bucks come through there, and several of them could be really good deer because they come from so many different areas and they get pressured so much.
Right.
And that's the reason I like knowing that bucks come through there and then go back there and hunt, because you never know what's going to come back through there.
Right. Right. And so then so you were talking about that buck was coming from the northwest. So, and just watching the video, like, it seemed like he got on you pretty quick. And so how did the hunt and, that all, like the shot and everything kind of play out?
Well, I had been sitting there because it was getting warm that day. We were fixing to have a pretty good warm spell here. It was going to be like in the 70s.
Hmm.
And that was the last morning of decently cool weather we was going to have. I think it was in the upper 30s maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there. I was actually looking on my maps, just looking at some other places, because I was going to go look at a couple other places with the warm weather, because we was going to have another front come in a couple of days. So I was just going to kind of bounce around and look, see what else I could find. Because, I'd already had my 3 spots found, but I was just wanting to kill some time. I didn't want to go hunting a good spot while it was so warm. And I was just sitting there kind of looking at my maps, and I heard something. I could tell it was a deer walking. There had been squirrels all morning. And there's definitely a difference hearing a squirrel in the leaves than there is a deer.
There is, yes.
Yeah. Different rhythm of the way they walk.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard that, and I picked my head up. I was looking, trying to figure out where it was coming from. And I looked to my right, and I just seen him coming down. As soon as I seen him, I knew he was a mature deer shooter. And that's when I grabbed cameras. I was hitting buttons on cameras, grabbed the bow. And my bow, actually, it hung on my hanger. And when it did, it made a little noise, and he stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about the time all the cameras came on and started recording. And I had to reach up there with my right hand and get my bow off the hanger. And I just had to spin like really fast motion, draw, and stop him, because that was the end of my shooting lanes. I had no other shooting lanes past that spot. And he was barely in it when I shot. I had to shoot through that limb a little bit, but yeah, it was really fast. It happened within 10 seconds, everything.
Yeah, yeah. Just in watching it, dude. Like when the cameras flipped on, you were getting your bow off the hanger. I was looking at it and I was like, oh, there's no way he's gonna pull this off, because like how quick it was gonna have to happen, dude. And you ripped that shot off with a quickness. Like I was just, I was surprised at how quick that how quickly you were able to pull all that off. And you're shooting a back tension release too, right?
Well, I think I may have been shooting my thumb release then. I can't remember. Uh, but I play around with releases all the time. I probably got 10 different ones.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I got a bunch of them. But I like to practice a lot with the back tension, but I like to hunt with a thumb.
Okay.
Just because it can be faster, but it's still got that similar, focus, aim, squeeze if I have to.
Right. Right.
Especially like the mule deer with him being way out there. It was that focus, aim, squeeze. But then you got, situations like the Wisconsin where, you got to get the pin on and go now because it's too fast.
Right. Right. Nice. So then I want to move to the Kansas hunt now. So, kind of similar question to start. What unique challenge, or what's different about hunting Kansas than other places that you've hunted? Like what's different about Kansas that you have to kind of think differently or that you have to approach differently?
Well, I guess it really wasn't a whole lot different. Different ground, I guess you could say.
Right.
Because I was hunting a river.
Mm-hmm.
So completely went from big hills of Wisconsin to a river, hunting a river, with a boat. So one thing about hunting with a boat is you don't have to go nearly as far, into an area.
I was just going to ask you that because I've seen you do some water access, and it's one of my favorite ways to get in and out of places. Do you, when you're going to go, and this is kind of off topic here, but we'll get back to the Kansas thing in a second. But when you're going out of state somewhere to hunt, do you look for water access as maybe like a place that you'll kind of prioritize over another place because it just cuts down on the amount of foot traffic that you're going to have to deal with?
Yeah, I do.
Mm-hmm.
But I like taking it. It's just another weapon in the arsenal is what I consider it because
Right.
May go to places, like the Wisconsin went there. There was places I could hunt, from the water,
Mm-hmm.
but I found better sign, walking in,
Right.
better places walking in. And then you got the Kansas deal. I went to some areas just to walk in and look. I run into people. I didn't find the sign I wanted to, so I went to the water access, and that's when I started finding less, hunting pressure and more deer sign.
Right.
So it's just another weapon to take with you whenever you go.
Right. Right. And so I can't remember in this one, were you using cameras on this one or not?
No, I was not.
You weren't. Okay.
I was not because you cannot use cell cameras in Kansas during the hunting season.
That's right. Yeah.
Yep.
So this was all just straight boots on the ground, then trying to just track down the sign, right?
Right. Yep. It's
So
just a surprise. You go in there, there's deer coming through there, but we're fixing to find out what's going to happen. So,
right.
yeah.
Right. So what, so you're looking for the things that you're looking for, right? Like you want that funnel, or something that's going to, push deer into a certain, particular area. What was it about this spot that you ended up hunting on this particular day that you were like, yep, this is the spot?
Well, I had went in there actually a couple of days before. I was hunting across the river in a funnel. It was a big slough, and we had the river right there, and it was about an 80-yard gap. And there was a pretty decent trail coming through it. And I hunted there while I was watching across the river because it's about 300 yards, and I could see across there. And I seen some deer come around this point. I got to looking on the map, and I could tell there was like an old CRP field, kind of grew up, bunch of little small trees and cedars and all that. But I seen that they was coming around this point right there, and it was a tight spot between that CRP field and the river.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, man, I want to go over there tomorrow morning and see what that looks like. I ended up going over there and went in there and found some good sign. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna hunt this because I seen deer through here yesterday. Hunt it and see what happens. Seen several deer all day long. But I was like, man, you know what? There's a better spot in here. I was like, this is a good spot. But I was like, there's something better. I just want to make sure, that I'm either in the best spot or, I'm either hunting the best spot. So I'm going to go find it.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up, I seen in the weather forecast there was a front coming in on the 10th, which I think had been a couple of days, ahead from when I hunted that spot. And I ended up making a big loop all the way around that CRP field and found this one area, and it was a tight spot in between the river and this CRP field, like a super narrow spot, like maybe 40, 50-yard strip of woods.
Okay.
And man, there were scrapes all down the edge of this field, this CRP field. And the CRP was so thick that the deer wasn't going in it.
Mm-hmm.
They was traveling the edge. And when I found that spot, I was like, man, when this weather hits, this wind's gonna switch. And these deer be traveling this end because we was gonna have a north wind when the weather hit.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, whenever this wind hits, these deer are gonna be traveling this south side of this field. Just because they can, play the wind, be
Right.
able to smell anything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what I found there. And it was just a perfect tight spot between the river and that field. And I knew I'd not been seeing deer go in that CRP. So I knew they was going to come through there. And I had those big scrapes right there in front of me. And I got just downwind of them to play it, and played where I could shoot back, downwind of me, but be able to shoot to the scrapes.
Right.
So
That's interesting. Like how often are you finding setups like planning for a wind switch? Because because that's like one of those things where it's like, that'll just throw deer out of whack, right? And like they'll have to move and make mistakes because they've been living on a southwest wind for 6 days or whatever, and now all of a sudden it's a north wind or it's an east wind, like which east winds, like we never get them here. This year was like one of the first years we actually had a couple of days of east winds, and like cameras were blowing up those days because deer were just now like, man, this is a wind that we don't ever get. Like, where am I going? They seem not, I don't want to say confused, but they just have to make some changes that aren't typical for them. Do you kind of find the same thing on those wind switches?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and that's what I love about it. I love a wind switch during the day.
Oh,
You can get a lot of them at night. You have a front come in during the day,
mm-hmm.
and then, that night the wind will switch, next morning to be, a completely different direction.
Mm-hmm.
But if you ever get that major wind switch at the middle of the day, when those deer are laying up and they've been laying there, most of the time, especially a big buck, he's going to lay where he can see, in front of him, and have the wind coming at his back where he can smell anything behind him. But when he's laying there and all of a sudden that wind is hitting him in the face from where he's, been looking, and he can't smell nothing behind him, he knows another area. Because if you're a deer and you live somewhere and you live in the wild, you got several areas, okay, this wind right here, I need to be there because I can lay there and smell and see and be safe.
Yeah.
So when that wind switches, especially during the day, they want to get to a different area to stay while that wind is that direction. So that's I really find wind switches being a big thing of getting deer up moving.
Right. So this area now you're hunting it. So how did this particular hunt play out with this deer?
Well, I got in there. I think it was 12:30 or something. Because the wind, it was one of those days. The front hit. It was 70 degrees at 9 o'clock that morning, and I'd hunted, one of my other spots where I could hunt with a south wind that morning. Seen a couple deer, and the weather was supposed to hit about 11, and it was going to start switching and come around and be out of the northwest by 12, and then be north by like 1 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
So like a 180 wind switch in 2 or 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So I got down from the spot I was hunting that morning, walking back to the truck. This is actually a spot I had walked into, the spot I'd hunted that morning. I was walking back to the truck, and the front hit me, and it immediately dropped 5 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could literally feel it in the air.
Right.
Immediately dropped 5 degrees, and I was like, "Ooh, I got to go quick." So I jumped the truck, took off, put the boat in, and got up there, and hadn't been sitting there probably an hour, maybe a little more, and had a little buck come pretty much the exact same way the one I killed did. come down. He stayed kind of below me a little further, about 20 yards, and he kind of went through and never smelled me like I thought he might because of the wind. But I guess I was up high enough, and my wind was blowing over him, and he was close enough to me.
Right.
My wind was just blowing over him. It wasn't, getting to him. He went on, and it wasn't just maybe 20 minutes later. I was sitting there, and I looked down below me, and I could see a deer standing there. And I couldn't see the head. I could just see a body. But it immediately hit me as soon as I seen it. I was like, that's a buck.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, how, because deer there, they're huge bodies.
Yeah.
Here, a 150-pound deer around here is a big deer, but up there, 250, that's pretty common.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man, that's a big deer. So you can see small bucks up there that's got a bigger body as a big deer around here does. So I was like, man, that's no doubt a buck. And then he moved his head, and I seen his horns. I was like, oh yeah, that's and I was expecting him to kind of stay down there where that little buck did, come around about 20 yards from me, which would have been, perfect. But he didn't. He actually walked up the little hill there and got, 10 yards from me. And I had one little hole. I actually drew back, and I looked down my arrow to see if I could make it through. And I eased back up and got on the sight and shot. And when I did, I actually cut a limb off. Like, you watch the video back enough, the limb is gone. And it hit him a little back, but it got that artery. And he didn't run 80 yards and fell.
Yeah.
But and the reason I didn't wait and let him get a little more to my right, kind of more in the open, is because he was so close. I was worried he was fixing to either walk up there and look at me, or walk and hit where I walked in, which I wasn't too worried about it, but there was a little bit of brush on the ground that I had to walk and brush up against when I walked in there. So that was really the only thing that I was worried about. And a big deer, he don't take chances. I figured if he come up there and smell me, he wasn't gonna stick around. He was gonna be gone. So that's the reason I took a shot at him.
Yeah, as I was watching it, I was because you said that in the post kind of interview or whatever, and as I was watching it, I was like, oh man, he's gonna catch his ground set. He's gonna get I was actually getting nervous for you while I was watching the video at the same time. Yeah. Man, and that was a killer buck too, man. He was a hammer, dude. I mean, the buck in Wisconsin was a good deer, but that deer was a hammer.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was my second biggest deer for sure. I ain't never seen brow tines on any deer like that.
Yeah.
Those were pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, those were pretty ridiculous. But man, I got one more question for you, buddy. Before I let you get out of here, I want to be sensitive to your time, but I always like to kind of close with this question. It's the hardest one. You ready?
Okay.
All right. So I know you don't watch a lot of sports, but you're making a basketball team, a 3-on-3 basketball team, 3 guys, right? But the goal is that you're going to drop these 3 guys off with tags on a piece of public land in any state, anywhere. It doesn't matter. Like it's just public land in general. And those 3 guys have to fill tags. Your life depends on it. Who are you picking to put on your team to fill those tags? They could be dead, they could be alive, they could be people you know, people you don't know. It doesn't matter. Just like if your life depended on it, 3 tags need to get filled on public land. Who are taking those 3 tags for you?
Three people.
Yep.
Number one, no doubt, is going to be the guy I do the show with, Jeremy. He's guaranteed that.
Yeah, he's a killer.
Oh man, let's see. Second, man, who probably I'll say probably. Well, no, I don't know. Man, that's.
Told you it was the toughest one, man.
Yeah, I know. I gotta have 3. I'm thinking here. It could be anyone. Yeah,
you could know them, not know them. They could be known, not known. They could be someone local. It doesn't matter who they are.
Okay. Well, there's a boy that hunts around not far from here, or he lives in a little town about 15 minutes from me. He's a good killer too.
Yeah.
I'd probably him for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then one more, probably my cousin.
Yeah.
He could kill some deer. Ain't no doubt about that. But he had a daughter this year, so his hunt may have slowed down, but at one time I'd have no doubt put my money on him for sure.
Yeah. Sounds like a good list to me, man. Sounds like you're gonna be safe.
Oh yeah. I'm confident in that.
Right.
I sure am.
Nice. Well, man, before I let you get going, buddy, why don't you let people know where they can find out more about you, where they can follow you, and where they can find out all the information they need to know about Do-It-Yourself Outdoors.
All right. You can find us on YouTube for one thing and watch all of our hunts. I have Instagram, Daniel_Lemmon19. Facebook, we got our Facebook, Do-It-Yourself Hunter. Find me on Facebook. You know, I look at it some, and I'll answer friend requests when I get them. Jeremy the same way, Facebook. We're fixing to try and start the TikTok and Instagram side with the Do-It-Yourself Hunter, but we haven't really broke into that yet. We're not big social media guys, but supposedly that's the side we need to start, kind of getting into. So we're fixing to start into that and be on TikTok and Instagram more with the Do-It-Yourself Hunter stuff.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on, buddy. Everyone should go check out their YouTube channel, give them a subscription or a sub, and like their videos. They're awesome. They're some of my favorite videos to watch on YouTube. Daniel, brother, I appreciate you coming on, and be sensitive to your time here, and just happy you were able to spend an hour of your day with me. I appreciate it.
Oh man, it was a pleasure. Appreciate it.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there as well. I'd be super appreciative if you do those couple things for me. Before I shut this thing down, I need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Spartan Forge, Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, and Genesee Beer. And until next time, we'll see y'all.